Welcome, everyone, to another edition of our interesting podcast called "What's Next," where I have the privilege and the opportunity to ask some really smart people in the L&D world about what they think is coming in the short term and in the long term, a couple of years out. Hard to think much beyond that. And so today I have Sarah Truchard as our guest. Sarah is from Citco. And Sarah, you want to tell us a little bit about what you do and a little bit about your background?
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Truchard. I work at Citco Petroleum. As Jerry said, I work in the talent and leadership development space. My entire career has been spent in talent management side, so performance management, succession, leadership development, onboarding, and a little bit of recruiting. And that is, I do all of that here at Citco minus the recruiting part now.
Okay. And because you and I have spoken a few times, thankfully your undergrad degree prepared you perfectly for this, correct?
Absolutely. My undergraduate degree is in exercise sports science, aka kinesiology. So I'm well amply prepared to be in the talent leadership development space.
I love this. I love this about you, how you went one direction and then you took your career in another one, and I think that's a good sign of a sound mind and a good heart. So those are good things. Well, Sarah, you know what the question is. It's a relatively simple. The question is simple. The answer is often complex. Um, what's next? Let's sort of focus maybe on the next year. Short term. What are the trends that you're seeing, or can be some of the problems that you're seeing, some of the challenges that you're seeing. What's coming at us?
I think there's a lot coming at the space. I mean, the most obvious answer would be AI, but
Hmm.
aside from that, I think what we're seeing is a lot of shift towards your standard performance to more of a skills based. And you're looking at a lot of skills versus just a very like structured job background and job career ladders. You're looking at more skills and then how those skills can then branch out to other pieces of the organization. And so looking at things like how does Sarah go from a kinesiology degree
Hmm.
to talent leadership development? What skills overlapped? And then how can we use that through in our business? And I think part of that is as a result of the AI shift and figuring out how to repurpose and retool and reskill. But I also think it's a matter of just the day and age of career progression and people wanting to be able to move up and through an organization, but more often than not, organizations are flat. So the ability to move up 3 or 4 layers before you get to the top is not necessarily doable now. So how do you transfer your skills to another department so that you can get back into the area of the organization that you want to be in at the top?
Yeah, and in previous conversations, you and I have talked about that too, where it's kind of less and less degree based, and sometimes less about experience, more about skills. And that's a fine line because you think with experience comes skills, which is often true.
Mhm.
But there are also people that have sometimes skills they don't know about or skills that they're discovering, and how do you develop them faster? So it's much, much, much more iterative and agile than than the standard, 3 years and click up, one level, and 3 years and click up another
Mhm.
level. I think what you're saying is though that system is ending, or far less pervasive than it used to be.
Sure, I think you're starting to see this the shift downward from that no longer being the approach, more on the fact of I don't need to hire someone senior into the role. I can take a step back and I can look at someone who may not have as much experience, but has the soft skill set to be able to pivot. They have adaptability. They're willing to grow and
Right.
stretch their skill set. I can teach people that work with me the foundations and the skills, the tactile skills of the role itself. If you don't
Right.
have the innate soft skills to be able to pivot and develop, that's where
Yeah.
there could be a gap, right? But
Yeah.
you can, and those are harder to train because those are innate within you,
Hmm.
right? But the actual fundamentals of the job, if you take a step back and look at the employee and their history, whether it's external or internal to the organization, how often have they been able to adapt to situations? How often have they flexed or grown their skill sets just within
Hmm.
projects alone that you can
Hmm.
now put them into this new role and let them handcuffed or uncuffed um, explore and then develop themselves. That I think
Yeah,
is a shift that you're starting to see because it doesn't really hurt anything to let people experiment and try.
right. Little sandbox time. You actually just said something.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of sparked a thought from me, and I hadn't considered it before, which is that AI may actually be raising the value of soft skills. Is that accurate? That hadn't occurred to me before. Probably should have. Probably occurred to you a long time ago. But the tech capability means that jobs like yours in leadership development and critical thinking and problem solving actually become far more valuable, don't they?
I mean, I would agree with that. Yes. Am I confident saying it replaces it all? I don't know yet. We're still figuring that out, but I will tell
Yeah,
you that within my role, I frequently will use AI to kind of fact check myself. Like, this is the conversation that I want to have. This is what
sure.
I want to lay out. Is this the right tone? Is this the right approach? And it can
Right.
help you to kind of narrow that down without jumping into a performance conversation and then completely
Yeah.
stepping in mud because you did it the wrong way. So I think it only
But
helps.
you still have to have that innate soft skill,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
That you're talking about, and that thing is rising significantly in importance.
Absolutely, because the human AI can't replace the human component of a conversation. It can't be robotically driven. It can't be chatbot driven. It can, you still need those pieces and that human element in order to make it
Yeah.
successful. It's
Yeah.
sometimes the wordsmithing that people need help with, and that's not the human element. That is
Yeah.
specifically just making sure it's crafted appropriately, but how you come across in the conversations,
Sure.
those soft skills are still absolutely needed. I think
Yeah.
AI can help enhance your conversation, but it can't do your conversation for you.
Right. Right. All right. Well, that's interesting. What else do you see coming? That's a good place to start. What else do you see that's kind of on the horizon? And it can be in your role, it could be in your own organization, or it could be just as you're, reading and listening and looking around the L&D world.
I think the other thing that's coming in, this is kind of a complete 180 shift from what we're talking about, but I hear more and more podcasts and reading more about, the vulnerability in the workplace. And Brene Brown and Adam Grant
Uh,
and Simon Sinek have
yeah.
been talking about that forever. But I feel like that is now coming and resurfacing up to the top in such a fast pace because of AI. Because again, that human element, I think people are starting to lose sight of that. And so understanding and recognizing that
Mm,
the vulnerability in that piece in the workplace has to meld with the AI component. You can't have one and not the other. So this one still needs to stay at the forefront. So I'm finding it interesting that on my LinkedIn feed and all the feeds that I get with white papers and stuff, it's either on vulnerability and workplace culture or AI. And so I feel like either that's how I have been searching or that,
right.
or people are starting to find that we still need to bring back that human element and you can't lose sight of the human aspect in spite of the
Hmm.
technology that's at our fingertips. So I think we're going to see a lot more of those dynamics or a lot more webinars, books, white papers,
Hmm.
conferences driven around AI and culture and how they complement each other, not how they
Yeah.
separate each other.
And
Mm-hmm.
intentionality in culture, right? You think of the big demographic shifts of, moving from an agricultural based society to more and more urban and all of those connections because, people
Mm-hmm.
went there because the jobs were there. And
Yeah.
that's where you made a living and you didn't have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and milk cows and such. But you suddenly moved into a place that where technology was really driving it, but you were moving
Right.
into a place where you had very few social connections. And some bad things started happening in the culture in general, at least in the United States during industrialization, that challenged an awful lot of those connections. And that seems to be maybe in an even bigger way happening here. We're getting less connected, but the need to remain connected is still vital for us. And do
Yes.
you think
It
that's
it
what the
is.
vulnerability is caused by, that disconnectedness?
I don't know if it's caused by disconnectedness. I think that people lose sight of the fact that we're human. And I know that that sounds very trite. At the same time, though,
Not at
we
all.
all come to work every day, right? Whether or not we're fully remote, hybrid, or fully in office, right? You
Yeah.
still have to have the human connection. And
Mhm.
the idea that we need to separate our lives, from our personal lives to the work life, that is so decades ago, right? And
Oh
yet
yeah.
we still
Yeah.
have we still deal with that in certain areas of and industries where that is still common. And I think you're starting to see
Mm,
that bridge completely gapped now. And I think that with the AI component in it, we're starting to see, like, I'll call it the scope creep, right? People are starting to kind of widen that again and say, well, I used AI to have this conversation. So now I'm foolproof. Was empathetic and this, that, and the other. But were you because you read from a script?
mhm.
So don't
That
use the human
doesn't, I don't think
aspect.
the classic definition of empathy is reading from a script. Yeah, there's no
Right,
listening.
exactly.
Did you
Exactly.
listen? Did your heart get involved? Yeah.
Right, exactly. So I think that in order to try to avoid going back to separate your personal versus your work life, I think that's why I'm seeing those trends and shifts within what I've researched, because I think that folks are starting to think, oh, the AI is going to take over my world, it's going to take over the human jobs. It may do some things, but in some areas, like where chatbots can be, replacing, a
Sure.
customer service or something way in the
Yeah.
future, right? But there's still the human component that it can never replace. And ensuring that you don't go
Yeah.
backwards and only rely on the technology and then take the human aspect out. So I think that that's where and why I'm starting to see it more. But I'm not exactly certain. I hope that with the new technology and AI, people recognize that the human aspect is even more important now than I think it
Yeah.
has ever been.
Yeah.
And we can't lose sight of that when we're looking at the new technologies.
So here, given what you've just said, here's my last question. Um, Given that human connection is more and more prominent and interaction and culture, let's drag this into the L&D world. How do we
Sure.
as L&D professionals, how do we get out in front of that and stay out in front of that and be a meaningful part of that conversation?
That's a great question. I think with any initiative and anything having to deal with culture, leadership development, you have to have the top of the house buy-in, right? If your executives are on board with the programs you're trying to instill to either empower your current culture, enhance the current culture, or completely redefine it, right? It starts at the top because they help to reinforce it down. But I don't see it as just a top-down approach. I see it as a top-down, bottom-up, and then middle down, middle up, right? Everybody has to take part in it. But I think the driver starts at the top. And then in making sure that in all of the leadership development programs uh, that we deploy, they reinforce the human
Mm,
element. They reinforce the culture that we're trying to establish at the company, whether or not it's at Citco
hmm.
or anywhere, right? It's not just Citco specific, right? So you're looking at, does this coincide with the culture that we're trying to build? Does this coincide with the type of leaders that we want to have in our company? What are we going to do and how are we going to get out in front of messaging with our leaders to show that their messaging coincides with what we're teaching? So everything kind of has to to flow together. But again, I think that the way to get it done and the way to get out in front of it and stay in front of it is having that executive buying. So having that,
Yeah.
having the ear of your top execs to make sure it resonates throughout the organization.
Does your team, do you even think of this in instructional design and how you lay out a learning experience? And in other words, is the intentionality, let's call it intentionality to be human. Does the intentionality to be human get driven down to that level of detail?
I don't think we've gotten there fully yet, but it's not because of lack of intent. It's we're trying to get there
Okay.
in the best ways possible, right? Um,
Okay.
I think when we look at the way that we're designing our programs, the the human aspect and intent is how can I best get this to you in a way that is going to make your life easier?
Yeah.
And I say that due to the nature of our business with folks out in our refineries, doing things in person is not always the right way to do
Right.
it, even though
Right.
that is a preferred way within the company because things
Yeah.
happen. So, how can I
Right.
do something virtual? How can I do something self paced that drives the message and provides that human component? Have we cured or have we solved the puzzle? Absolutely not. Are we getting better? I think so.
Yeah. So to summarize, what's new for you is a very old concept, as old as human civilization and culture itself, which is the centrality and dignity of the human being.
Mm-hmm. I think
Interesting.
so. I think it's coming
Okay.
back to that.
Well, we're going to have to talk about this some more because
Sure.
it's an interesting way to go. But for today, Sarah, thank you so much. You've given me a ton of things to think about and consider today. And we really appreciate you sharing your time and sharing your expertise with us.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.